Hi, this is Scott Park Phillips, and I'm got a treat for you today. It's Rory Miller, and he barely needs an introduction, but I'm going to go ahead and give one anyway. Uh, he's the author, first, of Meditations on Violence and Forced Decisions, Violence, a Writer's Guide,
You're reading the book titles off your shelf now. You don't have any of this
many
memorized.
other distinguished works, including
Yeah.
Living in the Deep Brain, Connecting with Your Intuition, his latest, which is essentially the subject we're going to talk about today. And Rory, well, I first met
These
Rory
words are hard,
by reading
especially
a
if you
book.
drink coffee instead of tea, then your words would be easier.
But yeah, wow.
It's one of my secrets.
It's part of cocooning right now is this drink a lot more coffee than usual. That's been my secret to surviving in the last couple months. The yeah, the simple introduction is, I think, the very first public workshop you did for civilians was in Oakland. It might have been the second one, third one, first one.
It was like the second or third year. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. First was in Seattle.
Oh,
It's
I guess
like
I knew
right
that.
right after I got back from Iraq. Yeah.
Yeah, I had read that. I had read the reviews of that. But yeah, I was the first one in Oakland, so I went to
Yeah.
it, and it was, boy, was it rough around the edges, and I really liked that about it as a workshop. It was in uh, the gang headquarters of a motorcycle club, and there were bullets all strewn around, and like broken glass and
Yeah.
gravel and oil spilt, and there was like an illegal Bud Light machine,
Mm-hmm.
and it there was motorcycle parts everywhere, and we were really into it, and I guess I'm bringing that up because I'm going to reference that first experience a few times. Um, but here you just wrote a book about intuition,
Mm-hmm.
and what is it?
I, this has evolved. So um, one of the things that is really important to not dying when things are moving really, really fast is to not process cognitively. If you're thinking in words in your head, you will never be fast enough to do anything. You won't be fast enough to survive. And in every martial art that has a sparring component, at some point they have some variation of you're overthinking this. When you think you stink, it has to become more internalized and more natural. And in my opinion, too many people try to internalize by, they call it muscle memory, but it's actually neural pathways. But if you do a thing a million times, you don't have to think about it. And that only really works if you're going to do that same thing exactly the same way in all circumstances. For actual functioning under stress, you have to take it to another level. You have to be able to not think about it, but also adapt. And the training mechanism for that are generally incompatible. It's
So
one of
training doesn't work for self-defense.
training the way most people do it. Rote training doesn't work for almost anything where you have to adapt. Play works, and the thing I usually break it down to in language is memorizing words and grammar does not generally help you communicate in a foreign language. Someone who's willing to get in there and play with the handful of words they do have and not care about grammar can get all the things language is supposed to do done.
So
Yeah.
I was looking at improving my Chinese yesterday, and um, I found the song "Let It Go" in Chinese,
Mm-hmm.
and just was singing along with it, and it was fascinating because I know the song, right? I know the meaning of the song, but I couldn't get the meaning, even at the speed it was going, which is faster than I can comprehend in Chinese. I was definitely getting chunks of it, but not the whole thing. But I felt like I had it perfectly. And I was saying, I was singing along. So it felt like I knew what it meant. But I couldn't, the part of my mind that could go, oh, that's the meaning of that phrase. Like, it's, like that wasn't able to keep up.
Yeah, it's not, because it's trying to translate word for word and you're already on the next word before you finished. The best translators I ever worked with were just obsessed with American culture. They were watching movies every chance they got, listening to the music. And that was where they got good. The ones that just had the academic degrees tended to suck. And especially in a free-flowing conversation, they couldn't keep up. The ones that, again, that played with language were better than the ones that tried to academically be good at it.
All right, this leads directly to the question of meditation. In a sense, this is your meditation book. But you don't have much formal training in meditation. You have an enormous amount of informal training known as your own experiments and reading books. Is that correct?
I got exposed to the only formal, well, there have been others since then, but when I was a kid, probably just preteen, I got exposed to progressive relaxation as a meditation thing. It's like the most basic grade school meditation.
Yeah.
But the book, I don't remember the title now. It's been a long time. One of the things they said in the book, and I was super idealistic as a kid. Someone could write something down. I go, yeah, I'll do that. And I didn't know we were homesteading at the time, and I'm going to go off on a lot of tangents. We were homesteading at the time, and one of the things we never realized is that all the stuff that was written in Mother Earth News was not actually anything anyone had done. It was basically people living in apartments fantasizing about homesteading and writing articles about what it'd be like, but we didn't know that. So we would read the articles and we would try it. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't work for shit. But being that idealistic and hard-headed, one of the things in that was that the meditative state of not having words in your head was supposed to be your natural state. And so you're supposed to be disciplined, traditional progressive relaxation. You have to be in a very comfortable, sitting or laying position. And it's like, but you can't really meditate unless you can do it walking and in eventually every aspect of your day-to-day life. And that was just the sitting meditation. I have a lot of friends that are into that. Is by this definition, it's a training wheel. It's not something you should do for very long. It's something you should get, you may need to get to a certain level, but you have to get over it. You shouldn't be spending the rest of your life. You should be able to maintain that mindset everywhere you are. Bad side effect, when I went to college, it was really hard for me to do essay questions because I was out of practice and thinking in words. I could get to the answer very quickly, but I had real trouble explaining how I got to the answer, because almost everything I was doing at the sub-cognitive level.
So, actually, one of the things I really enjoyed about reading the book was that it got me involved in telling my own story.
Good.
I'd read it and go, oh, what's my own story? So I was this math prodigy as a kid. I never took it past calculus, but I did take some special math classes and stuff. But basically, I was the kid that would just write down the answer, and I got all the way through high school just writing down the answer, and it was driving the teachers crazy because they'd want to give me a bad grade or accuse me of cheating, but no one else got the answer right, or whatever. It was obvious after a while that wasn't happening. And that's weird, right? What does that even mean? That means that I guess if we analyze it, that by your sort of method, my mind was thinking mathematically. It wasn't thinking in steps. It was simply making mathematical shapes or forms and just translating them into numbers.
And I don't want to see the weird thing with that. That's actually thinking. I can't remember who said it first, but the researchers really saw it. With the words in our head, the thing that most people think of as thinking is not thought. It's a byproduct of thought. The words on your computer screen are not what the computer is doing.
Hmm.
But when we start defining our intelligence or who we are as the thoughts in our head, as the words in our head, we're pretending that the words on the computer screen are the computer. And they're almost irrelevant.
We're jumping ahead here. I kind of want to, well, let me respond to that, and then I'll see if I can circle back a little. There are very strong arguments, I think, that thinking takes place in metaphors, and metaphors don't happen without words. And that is tough because we don't know. That means we've now defined thinking. That's all I just did there, was I defined it as a certain type of thing. And I think I think there's evidence that it's something else. I certainly think that when I'm thinking, I'm putting things outside of my body. I'm talking right now. I don't know what I'm going to say next. So it can't be the words themselves. It can't be.
Right. They're again, I think of them as byproducts. It's your brain is doing stuff all the time. It's compiling a huge amount of information. It's deciding what's important. It's throwing it, and every so often it lets you be consciously aware of a fraction of it. Because we work in teams, we live in tribes, and communication becomes very important. We tend to think that the part that we share, which is the words, is the most important part. So I obviously disagree. Not with you, but with the idea that the words are the important part.
Unless our main connection is dance and clothing, right?
Well, and this is why I kind of flinched when you said that metaphors happen in words, because you do metaphor and dance all the time. It's there's entire, physical arts that don't have any words. I mean, we attach words to them to teach them, but that's not the essence of it. That are also metaphors.
All right. This seems like we're diving into the back end of this conversation. So let's try to get back to the front. The front end, the Tao Te Ching starts, and numerous chapters throughout the Tao Te Ching, which is a Taoist text I use to teach meditation. I've been teaching meditation for about 3 years. I've been practicing, well, I don't ever remember not practicing, but I've got my first formal instruction at age 10, and I really started practicing daily at age about 20. And the Tao Te Ching first chapter says basically, that words, as defined as ideas, concepts, metaphors, visualizations even, are all not the thing. And so, I mean, that's the first line, and it gets repeated over and over in various different ways. And you looked initially at the question of sensory data and how sensory data gets named as the process of moving away from intuition.
Yes, hugely. The model that sprang up working on the book is when you're absolutely in your intuitive brain, you just do what needs to be done. You don't think about it. There's no process. If you're thirsty, you drink something. Next level up for that is you acknowledge your sensation. So you're thirsty, you think I'm thirsty, and then you drink something. The first one is purely intuitive brain. The second one is one level removed, but it's still pretty solid. You're doing fast reactions, you're getting stuff done, you're efficient. Next level up or the next level removed, if you want to put it that way, you start comparing it to all of your own history and previous experience. Whether this is more thirsty than you have been before, whether you're thirsty for water or thirsty for beer, whatever it is. And then the fourth level, which most people spend almost all their time at, is worrying about what other people will think and where it fits in the social sphere. So is it appropriate to drink now? Will someone think I'm a bad person if I have a beer instead of water? And as you move faster, it's not like these are not real. How people think does matter. But but they become less efficient at each level because you're adding more and more potentially bullshit variables to your own brain.
So if I were to summarize your book, which I think you did, the first part is how to jettison the bullshit. The second part is how to feed your intuition. And the third part is cleaning out toxicity.
I tried, yeah.
You tried to keep to that structure.
Yeah.
Look, you know, when I first met you, I said, Rory, you've got to read Keith Johnstone's book on improvisation for the theater, because improvisation is so similar to what you're saying is lacking in martial arts, or the difference between martial arts and fighting. Whatever real fighting is, or real self-defense, is all about improvising, in fact. And Keith Johnstone's book is a weird one because people in the theater world don't love it. They sort of acknowledge it, mostly reject it, but a lot, lots of priests, lots of religious people really like it. I first met Keith Johnstone at a Zen center in San Francisco, and when I was 15, and it completely messed me up because it's improvisation. The tricks to get you to be good at improvising are all about reversing what's normal, all about turning the normal order upside down so that you're not constrained.
If you want me to run on that, it's because I really appreciate that you recommended the book, and it's been hugely influential. And a lot of that is because if you want to stretch the metaphor to the breaking point, martial arts are a lot like acting. It's scripted. You know what the other guy is going to do. You know what you're supposed to do. You are supposed to. If you step off the script, you get in trouble. And improv is almost a direct correlation to fighting. Almost all the things that mess up a improv scene, especially stopping the action, denying what's going on, trying to think what you're supposed to do, or trying to think of something clever instead of just fitting into what's actually happening, are all the same things that get people messed up when things get really violent. If you're trying to stop the action, unless you're bigger and stronger, you can't. The idea of blocking instead of flowing with only serves big, strong people who tend not to be attacked anyway. The denying it's happening will absolutely get you messed up. Trying to think too hard, and this is where we started, what am I supposed to do right now, makes you slow enough that you'll never actually accomplish it, even if you figure it out. It was just that one list in there of the things that mess up improv scenes and how close they correlated things I was trying to teach people also mess up was amazing to me.
Yeah.
And I think that feeds into this whole thing. There's scripting is a problem, and at the same time, it's been such a part of our educational backgrounds growing up, going through schools. Here's the question, this is the right answer, do not deviate from that right answer. And that's the essence of what we call a closed system. And survival and life and almost everything important are actually open systems. There are a whole bunch of ways to be right, a whole bunch of ways to be wrong, and they change with every circumstance. And being willing to throw yourself, most people are not comfortable with that level of chaos. And in long-term, teaching, I think that's one of the biggest things, is trying to get people comfortable with chaos, that there aren't any right answers, but that's okay, because that means you can make some shit up that no one taught you.
So the first time I met you, we had this little conversation at the end. Because I had written a review basically saying, you should read this book. It'll make you feel like a little girl wearing pajamas, especially if you're a martial artist.
I hadn't thought about that in years. That was awesome.
And so, and so you owed me a beer for that. And so, and the first thing that I don't remember who said it first, you or me, but one of us said, morality is a choice. It was
Mhm.
like there was a little bit of a conversation going in the group around us, and one of us said morality is a choice, and the other one said, yeah, morality is a choice. And everyone around said, what? How could that possibly be? There was like sort of dissent, and we were just looking at each other going, you're enlightened, aren't you? And I'm enlightened too. There was that sort of moment. They talk about it in Buddhist scriptures where you can see the person's enlightened because their earlobes are really long. And I think it's a metaphor for something that you see, but other people don't notice, or something like that.
Or you're a werewolf.
Yeah,
No,
there could be.
you're saying low. Yeah.
It could be. Okay, so that was the setup. So in that workshop, you were encouraging us to break all kinds of things that might be holding us back, and to recognize them. And at that time, and I think you've made your course a lot safer psychically and emotionally, but we were talking about the genitals as a really legitimate target, and that's real in self-defense, and you might get grabbed in the genitals, and so we shouldn't be surprised by it. I think you said something like that. I don't think you said directly, you should grab each other's genitals, but you set it up, right? So I was playing with this woman. She had a lot of leather, she had a tough persona. And we were basically doing your one step, like I grab your ear and pull it down, and then you responded by, slow motion punching me in the nose, and then, and there's some armpit hair gets grabbed, and so I just grabbed her by the pussy, just grabbed really just suddenly. And I saw the shock on her face, and then the next thing right away, she grabbed my nuts, just squeezed. I was like, well, it's like there was no plan. I honestly just had permission, and I did this thing. I thought I had permission, which is, in retrospect, this was before the Me Too movement, and it could be really awkward. I think a lot of people would be inhibited even given permission. But I had a huge adrenaline drop, and then I went for her throat, and whatever, we kept going, and it was totally positive experience for both of us, as far as I can tell. We both, because we talked about it afterward.
Debriefed.
And I was like, man, they had just such a potent experience, for hours afterwards, when you get your nuts grabbed like that. And crossing lines. And so you said in the book, you went into it, I think you're kind of guiding people. You said something like, you shouldn't fear your unconscious mind.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't.
Why not?
Because it's not you. And this is, I can hit this from a couple of different directions. I've known some very, very, very bad people. But I've known a lot of good people that think that they have this terrible darkness inside them, and if they ever expressed it, and their dark side is about the size of a chihuahua. It is not a threat at all. One specific instance was someone who, as a kid, wasn't even shot at, was shot in the general direction of. They were off doing their thing and hunting, and someone wasn't careful. And he felt such rage at that time. Someone had shot at him, and he felt this rage. And this guy, many decades later, is convinced, because he felt that horrible rage that one time, that he has a dark beast inside him that must be controlled. And I'm listening to this story going, someone shot at you and you did exactly squat. You did nothing. You have no dark side. I'm worried about the guy that goes, that was a little inconvenient, and he cuts your throat. That's someone with the dark side. He doesn't necessarily need to feel all that rage, that you can feel that rage and not express it. That's pretty damn civilized. And so people have, First tack is that people tend to absolutely overestimate their darkness. Most people are actually pretty cool and they get along pretty well, and they'd rather get along than not get along. Being an ass.
Uh-oh.
Okay, you're either very still right now.
Yeah, repeat what you just said. Both of our
Dodge.
connections are unstable. I think it's my end.
Well, I'm working off. Anyway, you know the connection issues at my house. So, where do you want me to start from?
Well, you were just talking about people's dark sides not being too dark, not being too dark, not being dark
Okay.
at all. It's being kind of light gray.
Okay, so most people vastly overestimate their dark side. They think that they've got some horrible beast inside them, and they don't. If you can feel a huge amount of rage, but your instinct is not to act, you're pretty civilized. I'm far more worried about the guy that doesn't feel any huge rage, but is willing to do a lot of damage. You know, you annoy me, cut your throat.
So,
go ahead.
So, but come on. I think I think what you said there is good. You want people to trust you absolutely want people to trust their intuition, and you want people to explore their unconscious mind. Although if you're really getting into definitions of unconscious, it may be something you can't access.
So not everybody, because that's one of the things that also goes in the book. If you were raised in a really, really toxic household, your instincts are off. So a lot of the, say trust your intuition, but if you have an intuition that's going to make you think that every guy with a beard is a mortal danger, that needs to be recalibrated. And that's one of the things you have to recognize is where your instincts are off, and they're usually not off. They were just calibrated for a place that you aren't in anymore.
So there's also living a lie.
Yeah.
Right. And in any way that you might be living a lie, I wouldn't say that you should fear your unconscious, but if you get in touch with your unconscious and you're living a lie, you're going to have some major psycho-emotional things to get through.
And if you don't get in touch with your deeper brain, you aren't going to get through them. You're just going to stay in the same place. So it's one of those at that, when you look at it in that level, then that's looking at radical self-honesty. And I don't tend to like that term because it implies the rational mind and using words in your head. But it's still that idea of, and I think one of the things we talk about in teaching is anchoring to the initial impression. Because everyone's been so socialized and so civilized that a student will make contact. So you're sparring and they hit you, which is exactly what you trained them to do. And it's an awesome thing. And it's this huge step up. And they'll have a micro expression of, cool, I did it. And then immediately go in with the guilt is, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And you have to bring them back. And your first impression was not what you're feeling now or what you're expressing now. It was that micro expression of, I am powerful, I am strong, I can do this, this joy and accomplishment. So you hook them back to that. And part of what we would be talking about now with getting down to your true self is actually recognizing what you really feel. Because in that, again, that 4-level model, recognizing that when I feel, oh, that felt great. And then once you start thinking about what other people will think, then all the guilt comes pouring in. That's artificial and you create it. So as much as you can weed out that, and a lot of this goes into, you have to have an idea what being a good person means to you and something you're working towards. Right. But recognize, denying it doesn't make you stronger almost ever. You have to sit there. I like every child, if you've got a 2-year-old, they like breaking things because they're expressing power. They like making mommy and daddy do something, because they don't have a lot of power, but they use everything that they have and they enjoy it. If for some reason you don't enjoy being stronger, or smarter or something, you've been damaged. And trying to get to the point where you enjoy it, and then recognize that you're going to use that mostly to help people that you love. Because that's another way that we tend to be wired. Most people are not assholes, for various reasons. It's even when you put, anywhere from 8 to 190 really, really violent bad guys together, they work out a way to coexist. And it tends to be, in a lot of ways, really civilized. Some of the most polite cultures you'll ever run to are some of the ones that use violence as a tool. And it's anything from bikers to samurai. The etiquette tends to be very elaborate.
All right. So I'll push it back toward improvisational theater here a little bit. These are all key concepts in improv theater too. And trust your first thought, right, is mostly about getting people over fear, getting people to not be afraid. And so when Keith Johnson was sort of reinventing improvisation, because obviously how do you invent it? It had to have already been there.
Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
Because I want to define fear here.
Yeah.
Because again, going to that 4-level model, that first level, there is a first level fear, which is, oh my God, I'm going to die right now. You're falling off a cliff. There's a wild animal running at you. That could be at the first level. But the fear that you're talking about, and the fear that most people feel, is that 4th level fear of, am I doing this right? What will people think? So continue, but I just wanted to, this is not about getting over the fear of having a dog tear out your throat. This is getting over the fear that some imaginary person is going to laugh at you because you aren't as good as they want you to be at something that doesn't matter anyway.
Right. And that takes us to the monkey brain stuff, which we can review, but I bet people are pretty familiar with that at this point, although it's worth repeating. So you get over, you're getting past the initial fear. And so, and then you tie that whole thing into, like, how do you improve yourself, getting rid of toxicity, and this whole thing is completely intertwined. It's really difficult to actually organize it as a set of ideas. I think you did a good job, actually.
Thank you.
But it's hard because they constantly flow into each other as ideas. And so where was I going? Winning. So, like, celebrating your wins is one of the, as a teacher, as someone who's especially teaching kids movement stuff, where the entire purpose of school seems to be to get you to sit in your chair and behave. And when I was going to the schools, I'm teaching dance and kung fu as dance, and basically teaching people to trust their intuitive minds. I mean, that is very much what I was about. And the and so you do something, you perform. I'm constantly getting students to perform in front of each other. So you perform, you always do something like ta-da, at the end. It's like super important. That's, nobody gets good at gymnastics by going, oh, that was I almost did it. You fall flat on your face, and then you say, jump up, and you say, ta-da, no matter what happens. You drill that in to the students that and so John Stone actually, in his original book, talked about, being gentle with students, this kind of nurturing thing. Like, how do you get them over the fear so that they can be, so they can experience gradual success. And then he wrote something later, which was basically saying, I had that wrong. Sorry. You want to introduce failure in a really positive environment so that people think it's fun. And the sooner you make friends with failure as a tool to success, or as a tool that's just for intimacy, or as failure as just a tool for learning, the quicker you're going to progress.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember if I put it in this book or in principles-based instruction, but one of the things, I think it was Kathy Jackson that pointed out to me, is that every extraordinary person has a very similar relationship to failure. and that's that they like it because that's where they learned all their cool stuff.
Right.
The people that are afraid of failure never try, never put out, and that restricts their growth hugely.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fine line with what I teach about being gentle with students, because it's the and the line that I choose is to be honest, which means not coddling, but also not we call it creating an emotionally safe place. They can't be picked on, they can't be exploited, they can't be ridiculed. That needs to be removed from it. So in that sense, that can read as gentle, but at the same time, be strictly honest, because especially people that have been victimized before, you don't need to bullshit them. They already know it's horrible. So we can talk honestly about how horrible it is, how horrible it can be, and start growing their ability to control circumstances. So to me, that's the line. It's not for being gentle with the students, is that don't ridicule, don't lie.
I think of this as if you think in terms of archetypes, it's the paladin. It's heroic self-defense or heroic sacrifice, right? As opposed to the trickster, which is also super important, and I try to teach as well, which is reverse everything anybody's ever taught you, right? But they're both super important. But that's how you create the safe feeling, right? Is everybody here has the capacity to make the world better.
Yeah. People are so much more powerful than they can ever possibly grasp. And most coaches subconsciously, in my experience, actually undermine their power. They don't try to grow it. When I first started teaching jiu-jitsu, I had someone who'd been teaching for a long time go, I want to give you some advice. First day anyone comes to your class, just kick the shit out of them. And then no matter how long they stay with you, they'll be afraid to challenge you. And it's like, why the fuck would I want to start by making people afraid? That's the opposite of everything I'm going for. Yeah. But for him, he was teaching, so he would always have underlings. And a lot of people teach for that reason.
Yeah. So that's another Johnstone thing that it's in this introduction, and it's a revelation that I think most people miss. Culturally, we miss it, which is that teaching is not a substance where it's like a little bit, like bad teaching is a little bit and good teaching is a lot. Bad teaching actually screws you up. So it really, really screws you up.
Does damage.
Yeah. So we were, I want to talk about one of your blind spots, which I think you completely got over, and you may not even remember.
Cool.
Because, cognitive dissonance tends to erase the blind spots that we got over.
Or make people double down. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but there's like, no, I've never thought that. I now think the right thing, which is fine that the brain does that. But you had a little bit of what I would call, if I was being academic, I would call it, Marxist, left, low class self-hatred or something. In other words, you had a little hint of it's not good to make a lot of money off of other people or something. So there was something like that.
Still do. It's one of a lot of people raised poor were taught that they were poor because they were virtuous, and that's a really hard nut to crack.
Yeah.
And especially coming up to the Japanese arts, where there's this thing that the merchants were the evil class and the samurai were the good class.
It's a worldwide phenomenon. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of the it's still there, still echoes of it. I still do make a lot of decisions not in my own best financial interest to help people. And I still feel pretty good about that. So it's still there. But I am way more aware of it now. And one of the things I had to throw out for any of you martial arts instructors that are in that mindset that there's something wrong with making a profit, you are stepping into an arena that's about business. Your students need to see you be a strategist. If you go into there too arrogant to learn the rules and you fail in your business because you're too arrogant to learn the rules, you can't pretend you're a martial artist. Fuck that.
Yeah, okay. Um, and I think when you said that, I think there was a hookah involved, like and some 7 Up and something.
There often is, yeah.
And I was, and
It's
you're
on the
not,
deck right now.
yeah, and I gave you a quick, summary of Adam Smith,
Yeah.
and but then like a month later, you came out with this, you're like this sort of aphorism, which was, uh, richer, stronger, and smarter. Like you should always, everyone around you, you should be trying to make them richer, stronger, and smarter. And I thought, oh, that's great, but it needs 2 more. It needs richer, stronger, smarter, funnier, and better looking. So I made that my little chant, like, new students, why are you working with this other person? You're partnering with someone. What's your goal? To make them richer, stronger, smarter, funnier, and better looking.
I don't know. You have to like scars to be better looking where I come from. So, yeah.
Hey, what makes somebody better looking, right? And I think that's sort of a key idea that you kind of touch on more toward the end of the book, where strategies for getting to your to trusting your intuition often come out of reversing something or removing something. So to get to that, I wanted to ask you about one of the fascinating things you explained to me, which is really about conceptualization. It's something I knew, but and it's in psychology. There's something called reward and punishment, and positive and negative reinforcement. So what
Both, yeah.
is that? I mean, lay it out, and then let's create some better language, because that stuff sucks.
Almost every academic thing has operational definitions. So they have their own language, their own jargon. So in psychology, particularly behavior psychology, reward or reinforcement is anything that makes you want to do it more, and punishment is anything that makes you want to do it less. So obviously giving people treats or giving puppies treats, do it more. Giving them electric shocks, they do it less.
And smiling and criticizing, right?
Right. So that runs into anything. The positive and negative, and this is where the language gets technical, and also where it pisses me off. Not the language of psychology, the way people misunderstand it, is positive doesn't mean good, it means presence. And negative doesn't mean bad, it means absence. So positive reinforcement is adding something to the system that's seen as a reward. Negative reinforcement is removing something from the system that is seen as a reward. Okay. So if someone who has always treated you badly doesn't treat you badly that day, that's a negative reward. It's still a reward, but it's a reward by absence. A positive punishment would be like introducing, and this is why the language would be like introducing pain to the system.
Right. So it's whatever language we give it, there's a quadrant, right? It's 4 parts.
Yeah. Yes, good, bad, and absence and presence.
Yeah, and so so there's a 4-part quadrant in one of the chapters from the Tao Te Ching, from Lao Tzu's, about good teachers. Or what is good teacher? The first type of teacher is like a shadowy presence, right? And it sort of leaves it for you to interpret what that might mean, but has a kind of minimalist involvement. You might think you did it yourself, you taught yourself. There's a kind of maybe they're just supportive in some way that is not really visible.
They evoke instead of implant.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
The second type uses love and kindness and nurtures you. And the third kind scares you, frightens you. And the fourth kind, the word means to hack, like the hacker, but it literally means to cuts you off. Like it means You know, it's the teacher who just says goodbye
Mm-hmm.
or go do it on your own. I'm out of
Mm-hmm.
here. You know, it's not, I have no role. Uh, so I thought it's close, right? It's close.
It's got some similarities, yeah. The to me, it's like I strive to be that type one, you know, the shadow of the evoker. I, you know, encourage. No, I did not do this. You did this. But I always got the best results for myself when I had a type 3 teacher.
Type 3 from fear.
So someone who, you know, brutal workouts, brutal tests. The, you know, yes, you can't move. Good, we're going for another half hour. The
Yeah. And so
yeah.
I think that's I think it's pretty interesting, right? One way to think about the four quadrants is that there's no way you could possibly avoid all four,
Mhm.
right? You're always there. It's just the nature of the way we learn is that we're always learning and we're always conditioning each other. And so,
Mhm.
you know, the same thing with those four Taoist four. It's simply impossible to be a teacher and not use all four.
Yeah.
The question is, are you aware? can you can you can you engage with it in this in a strategic way?
And realistically, until someone shows you that model, you can't do it consciously.
Mhm.
And this goes for almost, you know, the stuff in Concom, almost the stuff in living in the deep brain is trying to put words on stuff that are essentially non-word stuff. And
Mhm.
until you're aware, you can't get better at it. You just have to be careful that you don't start overthinking it and messing yourself up more.
So seems like a conflict, not a real conflict, which is that to improve your
Mm-hmm.
intuition improving skills, whether you're transmitting them to others
Yeah.
or to yourself, you need to be good at articulation.
When you were talking earlier about both operant conditioning, you know, positive, negative, reward and punishment, and in a conversation, so quoting you both, you know, your eye contact, whether you smile, all of this are rewards for the other person you're talking to. You can steer a conversation by what you pay attention to and what you dismiss. Um, we're always doing it unconsciously. We have to be aware of it consciously so that we don't accidentally do it wrong. A lot of teachers don't realize that when they criticize, they punish.
Mm.
Criticism is punishment. And so you can get someone who's, you're teaching them to be good, but you're punishing them for success. Every time an instructor says, oh yeah, but you know what, your foot's in the wrong place. They just fucked up their own, oh yes, where they were trying to do the right thing. And if again, if you can't see it, you can't fix it.
Yeah, you know, I actually taught an online class to a group of third graders. One of my anyway, someone set up a class for me to teach during our cocooning time, where we're all turning into
Our cocooning
butterflies.
time.
And that it's they yeah. So I was teaching like 20 kids on this in this same format, and we're doing all kinds of animal movement,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I loved doing it because I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't been teaching in a while, and I just loved it. Um, but I felt like they got about 10% of me, you know, because so much of teaching is subtle embodiment. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's about my capacity as a teacher to observe
Yeah.
what's happening in not just the kids, but the room. And I figured this out in my early 20s. I was teaching gymnastics and I was at several different schools. And I went, why? These kids don't seem that different. They're the same demographic. You know, why is it so much easier at this school than this school? And I started experimenting with the rooms, just moving things around in the rooms. And then working with where are students looking? You know, what are they seeing? And my teaching got way better because it it really matters. You know, it really matters. It really, really matters where they're looking, how they're engaged with the space, and that the absence, right? This is you bring this up, and I think it's one of the most fascinating things about learning is this idea that the absence of feedback could actually be the most potent teacher.
Walk that out some more.
Well, so Tai Chi, because I teach Tai Chi, I think of as mainly about learning to ignore your teacher and reverse everything they've ever said. Like, it's the weirdest system ever. It's about reversing norms and flipping things on their heads and turning things upside down. And it's a bunch of tricks. I think the more that people can understand it as we're doing magic tricks, we're manipulating not only our own awareness, but other people's awareness of what's real, so that we can create illusions of enormous power or other things, or being frozen, various types of things that you can create by manipulating things. And the reason those work, the main reason those work, is because people expect to feel something and then don't. There's an absence there, and it causes a cognitive disconnect.
Okay, so working in the void fighting. Okay.
Yeah, it's all about void fighting in that sense. It's also about, for instance, what I've been teaching, like how to connect the front of your body as a single unit. Right? I've been like trying to teach this to people, and it takes quite a while because people, because you can't feel it when you're standing up. You can only feel it when you're on the ground jumping like a rabbit, or on your back, you know, wrestling. You can feel it on the ground. People who ground fighting can get it quicker, I think. Yeah. But you're standing up, no, there's no effort. Your front connection requires no felt effort, or almost no felt effort. So it's actually, but it's incredibly potent. But it's super hard to learn because you get no direct feedback.
I find that a lot of things, and we've talked about this before, but a lot of things go back to that conscious or lack of conscious understanding. Almost anything in a martial art that says it takes 10 years to master means that the person teaching it actually has no clue what they're doing, and it's going to take 10 years of trial and error to replicate it. But when I found someone that did understand what they were doing, they could teach this in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Fudging takes about 45 minutes or 10 years.
Yeah, no, fudging is not even a real thing.
There's a system, or then if you don't like the phrase, there's a system of short power that generally takes about 10 years to master if someone doesn't know what they're doing, but you can teach it in 45 minutes.
Well, so that's one of the things you did in that first workshop, right? And you do consistently. You said, you know, here's I don't know, 3 hours or a day on power training.
Yeah.
And nearly everybody improves a little bit, and people who've never had power training have enough. They now have enough.
Yeah.
And I had already come to that realization that power training was ridiculous. In general, power training was a ridiculous idea, and that either you can get the basic things which would improve your power very, very quickly with a very limited amount of practice, or it's not worth it. It's just a massive investment.
And there are a couple. It doesn't take a lot of time to get good if you know what you're doing. But like there's two. It's like I almost never teach dead hand or joint expansion. Joint expansion I'm just getting now, but I don't understand them well enough to teach them. those were the things that I had to go through the experience and replicate, but never ran into an instructor that could actually explain it enough to give me a fast track to it. I'm sure the fast track exists. I just haven't found it yet. But so I don't bother to teach those two. Those are things I work on for myself. But if I don't know it well enough, I don't waste time teaching it.
All right. One of the things that's amazing about talking to you in general, Rory, is that you and I have incredibly different backgrounds. I mean, we both practice martial arts, but I mean, it's hard. I mean, for two people in the same culture to be so different. We're pretty different in our.
It's Chinese, Japanese, cop, San Francisco. Yeah.
I mean, we could go through it for people, but it's just weird how much we agree on what's real. You know, that's just weird.
I don't think so much. It's one of those, most of the people that are effective in similar ways. And most of the people that aren't really bound by dogma. And this is one of the things within the martial arts in general is like, have you read anything on the difference between empirically based and eminence-based studies?
I mean, eminence means that you're...
For years, medicine was not based on science.
Yeah, right.
It was eminence-based, which means there was a guy that had a reputation for being really good at knee surgery, so we'll just do what he does.
Yeah. You can't be cutting edge and evidence-based at the same time.
Yeah, so martial arts is traditionally eminence-based. There's never going to be a scientific study on what works on the street because they won't let us, attack college students with axes anymore. So
so let's just make this clear. There's no test for self-defense.
There's no comprehensive test. Anything you've survived, we don't know. It's you can sit there and I've been in this many encounters and like that's cool. How many of them were luck? Yeah, because that's a lot of. Been very, very lucky.
See, I love that about you because you have so much credibility when you say it.
But what we have is eminence based.
Yeah.
And so people that haven't been taught to question their instructors tend to, my guy, whoever that is, whatever he did, is the answer. He's the root. He's the truth. If you worry about what works and you're willing to reject the dogma, we tend to wind up pretty similar. Casey likes to say that when you apply the chisel reality, the statue you're going to get looks pretty similar.
Okay.
It's a tortured
That's
metaphor,
a terrible analogy, but
tortured metaphor, but I like it.
Yeah.
But I also like the idea that most of learning to be effective fighting is not about giving you stuff. It's about chipping away all the shit that doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and if you're sitting there going, I might be wrong about everything, and everyone I know and respect and love might be wrong about everything. So let's take a look at what we see, and we both think that way. That willingness to I could be wrong about every fucking thing I think I know, and that makes the world cooler for me. It doesn't make it scarier.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a huge thing. That in itself is something we can instantly bond over, and which everyone listening to this should try to bond with someone over the fact that you could be wrong.
About everything.
It's just such a deep heart feeling.
And surety, being sure, which is not the same word as surety, but being sure is inherently toxic. It's one of those, or I don't know, fossilizing. You lock up. When you're sure, you can't experiment because you might prove yourself wrong.
All right. So there's all this stuff in that kind of surprised me about. I think you have a chapter on trolls, which is the wrong word because it means something else now, but it's funny. But you have to get that you actually mean elves and imaginary things and pagan.
I got that while I was with Toby in Sweden. So trolls were the right word.
Yeah. All right. So trolls are big in Sweden, and and
I've been in Iceland. It would have been elves.
Right. What I have often called the reanimation of the world, or the re-enchantment of the world as a strategy, and that has a couple of conflicts that I wanted to bring up. Well, first let's bring talismans.
Mm-hmm.
Talismans. I think this is a place we may disagree. So
Go.
talismans, and also that applies to the idea of, can you use fantasy in scenario training, right? So, well, you could respond right now. I'll talk about it a little bit. So talismans. Okay, this is super cool thing. I did this interview with this guy who he was in China, and he's a Chinese guy, and he got into the archives that the communists had in this region near Wuhan, actually, where they were they caught all these people who were part of martial arts cults, thousands of them, and they tortured them to give confessions, and then they executed them, and they just they wrote it all down, and he got all this stuff, and he left the country and started writing about it, and he can't go back now, not now anyway, maybe at some point in the future. And so one of the things he explained is that there were these wandering martial arts teachers, and they would wander into a village, and they would set up these religions that were based on various deity invocations and all sorts of long lists of rules, and almost all of them had invulnerability training that made you somehow invulnerable to knives. And you usually start with punches, and they work up to blade, sticks, and then clubs, and then bullets, and and there's obviously a substantial amount of deceit and talismanic thinking and that kind of thing. But the thing is he had the data right there where all these people were being terrorized by groups of bandits, armed bandits, coming through regularly and just ravishing this region. And these guys would come in, set up these little cults, and the villages had superior numbers. They just they were afraid. And once you trained them in these martial arts, because they were teaching real martial arts techniques too that worked, but they were teaching them with invulnerability training. They would go off and they would hunt down the bandits and get rid of them. And so here you have a long-standing tradition in China, right? This was the last of it because they were all executed. But we know back through history, these kinds of things existed in very elaborate forms. And at the militia level anyway, at the village defense level, this kind of training was very effective. It really worked.
You want me to say something now?
Yeah. Okay. That was the setup.
No, because I do agree with you. There is a lot of magical thinking that works. There's as much as you can spoof any of the no-touch knockout people or whatever. It clearly works on their own people because people are very suggestible. And you can use that power to make people think that they're invulnerable, so they'll run towards stuff. In US history, the Ghost Shirt Society. Yeah. It works to the extent, I mean, if you look at the first battle that they were in, they did very, very, very well. But then afterwards they looked, and the Ghost Shirts didn't actually stop the bullets. Once they looked there, and they were not as confident in the next battle, and it didn't go as well. Yeah. And so that's, so it works. And one of the things I've considered for a long time is if I'm ever in a class and I were to tell all the students in the class, you know what, if you're ever in deep, deep trouble, you'll hear my voice in your head telling you to fight. Just follow the voice. If I were to say that, that would probably work for 80% of the people in the class. But I have this moral issue with selling snake oil or magic, even if it works. Placebo effects works, but I just have a moral issue with giving people sugar pills and telling them it'll cure their cancer. And that is my personal moral choice, and it's for a lot of reasons. but I can't deny that talismans are effective.
Mhm.
Um, I just ethically won't do it.
All right, but let's try to come to an agreement here, because
Mm-hmm.
I actually think there are ways in which it's great and it
Mm-hmm.
works, and
Mm-hmm.
there it's sort of like what we're talking about. How do you make what's unconscious conscious enough so that, yeah, so you can do it in a moral way. I mean,
Yeah.
that's basically your objection, right?
Not all of my ethics are about utility. They're just some things,
Right.
and I can dig into this one. I can tell you why.
Hmm.
Um, it's I am significantly more afraid of starting a cult than of anything else
Hmm.
in my head, and stepping into this, because there's a whole bunch of um, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you learn when you're hunting
Hmm.
as a kid that occasionally I want to bring back into this, ways to just be still and not be noticed. And um but it's, yeah, no, the thing that terrifies me more than anything is starting a cult. What we were talking about earlier, this the instructors that want to have underlings.
Hmm.
Fucking hate underlings. I like colleagues, I like competitors, I like challengers.
Right.
But it's okay, can I bring out a famous name in martial arts?
Sure.
Okay, you've heard the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid, right?
Yeah. Yes, of course.
Okay,
I
so I
know where
did
it comes from too.
okay, yeah, we know where it comes from. So I did a cop grappling class with the Gracies, and they were super cool. They were humble, they were nice, they never did anything to encourage any kind of adoration or adulation. But half of the people left that class almost fully as cult members.
Uh-huh.
And when someone is as good as they are and as charismatic, they could start a cult by accident.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, and that they no magic, everything they do is just excellent physics and excellent body mechanics.
I hate that word. I think it's talismanic. Body mechanics. Show me the paper. Show me the academic paper.
I
That's just
there
talismanic.
but there's entire college
All right.
degrees based on understanding that. It's
I'm
it's
just
just
pushing you
using
back. I'm just
leverage
pushing
properly.
back, but I'm
Yeah,
just,
it's
that's
just
my
using
pet
leverage
peeve.
properly, having better structure than you're working against, working against weak structure instead of strong structure. It's just obvious.
Okay.
Um, but the but that's one thing is, and so my joke is that they don't make Kool-Aid, but they somehow sweat Kool-Aid.
Hmm. Hmm.
They aren't trying, but people get so enamored so quickly, and I don't ever want to be involved in anything like that. It's on purpose or by accident. So
Well,
don't talk about magic in class.
I'm charismatic, but I'm so disagreeable
Yeah,
that there's no chance of me charting a cult.
yeah,
I
you're
tried.
charismatically annoying. Yeah, you
Yeah.
need a front person.
Yeah. Thank you. Are you?
Yeah,
Oh, never mind.
yeah.
You're not available. I need a front person. Good point.
Yeah.
So charismatically annoying.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. It is true. It's my fate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a test. I mean, and maybe that's why I can do this. So I I have been. If you look in the Tai Chi world, almost everybody talks about the Dantian being what is used to control your body. You
Mm-hmm.
make the movement come from the Dantian. This thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you need to read Chinese literature. Okay, this whole cultivation inside your Dantian thing, that's how you make someone a slave. That's like everybody knew this.
Mm-hmm.
If you there are temples across the entire swath of northern China. There are temples to the god of the north, Xuan Wu, the mysterious warrior, he's called, and they're temple towers, so they could see the Mongols coming. So it's like, and the offerings were made, and his story. It's a 100-chapter book about him, and everybody knew these stories. They were the most commonly performed plays. It was part of the religion. They knew this story about this god who he tries to come to enlightenment by all these rebirths. He's constantly not getting it, and then finally he gets it. And then his job becomes to capture all these demons who eventually become enlisted as the thunder gods. And that's the story. And how does he do it? He gets them to cultivate in their elixir in their Dantian. That's how he does it. That's how he controls them all at one by one. And it's the fact that people don't know this up front. It's almost like there's a sadistic part of me which is like, you deserve what you get. If you don't investigate the culture you're studying enough to read the most basic texts, find out this stuff, well, okay, you don't deserve it. I take it back. But I have that feeling, right? And so I've been running around saying, well, if you want to control yourself, use your Dantian, but if you want to control somebody else, start up here, move here. That's the way you actually can control them. Or how about just move outside your body, right? Use empty space. That's what you really do. Anyway, it's a fun story that should lead us to talking more about elves. But let me. This is one of the first questions I asked you, because when you explained why scenario training is so important, and the answer, of course, is because you need adrenalized experience improvising, which is what theater is.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's not the answer, but that's that. And to me, that was like, well, that's what going on the stage is about. That's why people fail. A major reason they fail is because they've never experienced adrenaline before, and they're like, ah. See,
adrenaline, I don't think adrenaline is as important for me for scenario training. I don't believe in stress inoculation.
Okay.
I believe that, it doesn't matter how many times you've jumped off a cliff or jumped out of an airplane. When someone tries to stab you in the belly, it's a totally different flavor of adrenaline.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
So for me, just scenario training is critical because every place else, training is separate from judgment. Yeah, you learn how to hit somebody, you don't learn when or how to explain it. And scenario training is about the combination of whatever you can do plus your judgment.
So scenarios should, if we're teaching self-defense, scenarios should be things that could happen.
Absolutely. Things that can happen specifically to that student.
Right.
It's and that's why I usually discourage people from doing scenario training or from teaching it unless they've had some formal training and preferably an apprenticeship. Because unless your role players are good enough actors to actually play real bad guys, unless they have the judgment when you do something to respond the way a real bad guy would, you're going to teach them bad tactics and not even know it. You're going to teach them that things were. I ran into one guy who goes, every scenario must end with a fight. It's like, then you're teaching people that they can't talk their way out. You're teaching people that they can't avoid. And so you're actually crippling them.
Yeah. So that's just really important material, and I appreciate that. But if we're talking about the bigger subject of intuition or practice, I practice martial arts every day because I love all these things about it.
Yeah.
I'm not doing scenario training, and I've deeply considered scenario and I've done a lot of scenario training, and I've deeply considered it. So, and but the imagination has a really important role in intuition, creating intuition, and in becoming a freer person. I think that's one of our goals. Also in telling better stories.
Intuition is or imagination. This is a metaphor I've stumbled across recently or popped up in my head. So, especially since the lockdown, we're watching TV, reading stuff, listening to music, and those are all inherently passive. And the image that popped in my head is that almost everyone I know, as far as their imagination goes, are scavengers. They aren't producers. They aren't hunters. They aren't even prey. they're scavenging other people's imagination rather than develop their own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, I think that's just one of many, many, many things that dilutes their potential, for want of a better phrase. Is everyone should be doing something creative. There should be something creative that you have as a hobby.
All right.
So, or a job.
This could go in so many different directions, but I did want to explain something about meditation. So the type of meditation that you describe, when you describe methods, you divert from what I do. But the basic thing you're describing, the wordless experience, is the same. And we have, in my meditation tradition, we call that zoang, sitting and forgetting. I do it standing mainly, standing still, and I always do it in nature. Do it in place, but I don't want to be distracted. And yeah, you could say I'm low level because I keep doing it, right? But actually, I'm not trying to get anything out of it. It's its own refresh button, you know, and I have that refresh button right now. But doing it every day, I've never seen a reason to stop.
And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying at some point that should be where you are almost all the time. That should be the natural brain. That's where people are born. I mean, that's where fucking turtles are. It's not hard.
Yeah.
We make it hard, but it's not.
Right. So you discard everything, and then that experience becomes, we call it irreversible. I could not get rid of that experience if I tried.
The experience of voicelessness.
Access to whatever we want to call that. So we try not to name it in my tradition. We actually try actively to not name it.
There's a power to not naming.
Yeah, it's in the absence thing.
Yeah.
And so, but there's this thing we name called the golden elixir, and that is all about the spatial imagination and syncing up the spatial imagination with the way you move.
Yeah.
And that, so I just want to say, like, I really have a very significant daily practice that involves active imagination and passive imagination, actually. I think it's both. So yeah, I'm actually selling that, everybody. I just started selling it. It's really, really difficult to sell, but if you're interested, you can sign up for my classes. Rory, what was it about imagination? Oh wait, what were we talking about just before this?
I don't know. I'm the one with all the concussions. I can't remember shit.
All right, I know there was one more thing I wanted. I heard so many. Look at my list. This is all the things to talk about. Cool.
Nice.
It's we've gotten to about 3 of them.
It happens.
Yeah. Okay. Saying yes, saying no, and the fake because. So saying yes is a superpower. Saying no, you talk about fasting, all the different ways in which you could cut something off, saying no to TV, saying no to the influence,
blindfolding,
all that kind of stuff. So saying no and saying yes are both superpowers. There's a great movie about, I mean, it's not that great a movie, but it's a funny movie about it. He goes to like a self-help workshop, and the guy's like, all you need to learn is to say yes. And he's like, really? That's it? And so he just starts saying yes to everything. His world completely changes. It's just he goes on this wild ride. He eventually meets the guy later, and he's like, yeah, you changed my life. I've said yes to everything. He's like, well, I didn't really mean that. I was just trying to get you in a general direction. It's pretty funny. But yeah, and that's a Keith Johnstone thing. It's not just about saying yes; it's about accepting all offers, right?
Yeah.
But what about the false because?
The false because.
Are you aware of this?
No, keep going.
Well, so I mean, we live in I would say most societies worldwide have the idea of the apocalypse,
Hmm.
right? You should be moral because the apocalypse. You should eat this food because the apocalypse, and you should not eat at McDonald's because the apocalypse. You know that there's and the apocalypse, of course, is just something really bad happening in the future that is going to,
Okay.
whatever it's going to do, heat up the planet or a tidal wave or something bad's going to happen, meteors.
Yeah, I think I have two ideas that probably combine to get there,
Yeah.
or in my personal lexicon. And one is um, bullshit moral attributions,
Hmm.
which is when people just decide that something's wrong because it feels icky, but they don't look at it.
Hmm.
So one of the examples is, why can't people sell organs?
Hmm.
Right? It's
Hmm.
because people think that would be icky. But it would make so much sense in so many ways for so many people on both ends of the deal.
Uh-huh.
Um, so bullshit moral attributions and what was the other? I almost want to throw up my hands to stop here while I think.
Yeah, that's one
Uh,
of the things we like about each other.
yeah, you can cut this later, but but there were two. So bullshit moral attributions, and I'm gonna have to retract the thing. So you were talking about,
The
because of the
fake because.
apocalypse, because
Yeah.
of the rationalizations versus reasons.
Right, right,
is
right.
is almost everyone, the reasons they say, or what they say are reasons, aren't, and you can tell this because the behavior doesn't match their beliefs.
So that's a superpower, right? Recognizing that.
It is, but it's almost terrifying when you realize how much people are powered by bullshit.
Mm. Oh,
um
you could be afraid of it, but so that's actually what I want to get at. The
it's
fake
Yeah.
because has a really negative side. So if I'm a con man and I want to manipulate you, just adding a fake because you should buy
Mhm.
this book because you're a really great reader.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you say after the because. It automatically works on your unconscious mind to get you to do the thing.
Hmm.
So and so we get into these massive false becauses, because you know everybody needs insurance in order to
Yes.
do anything, right? Because and but you can also use it on yourself and your friends. Uh, if you just like, I'm having trouble doing something, just create a false because.
Hmm.
So it has a positive aspect too. You know.
Yeah, you can use it for motivation.
Anyway, I
Yeah.
thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah.
All right, we've had a conversation that I thought would be really that I haven't seen you have it in public before, and I thought it was really poignant. Um, Self-defense. Um, some people would argue it's innate. We've always done it. It's the most important
Hmm.
element of freedom. Uh, Yet it keeps being redefined. It's almost like you stepped into the field and said, nobody really understands what self-defense is. I'm going to help you guys understand it. And I, I, and so that's the prelude. And then we had a conversation about jails and
Hmm.
prisons.
Hmm.
And if you go back to 1880s, there's a lot of discussion about maybe we shouldn't just hang all thieves,
Yeah.
because before, but in 1800, it was just a given. If you caught a thief, you were going to
Yeah.
hang them.
That's what a
Um,
felony was.
we had a great idea. We had this fantastic idea that, maybe there's a mistake. And so people should be presumed innocent. And we should have a jury of 12 peers, because it's going to be really hard to fool 12 people. But the goal was to execute you. And yeah, and I mean, there's such a thing in most kingdoms. There was a place, the king's enemies, if they're individuals, could be put in a
Yeah.
dungeon. Sure, we had that. But jails were largely created for riffraff. They were created for prostitutes who are just who are too noisy, and people who are uh, uh, you know, doing really minor stuff. But if you're actually
Debtors,
with beggars, yeah, if you got
debtors, yeah, yeah.
caught stealing something, it was the death sentence. And then
Mm-hmm.
people got rich, and it was like, why would you execute someone for stealing a loaf of bread?
Yeah.
And then we
So,
invented self-defense.
well, it's not. We invented the legal concept of self-defense. It's always been a basic thing. All animals will try not to die. But one of the things, and I can't remember again whether it's this book or the other one I'm working on. A lot of our moral things are based on our resources. They aren't based on an absolute. And this is, I think, going back to your first thing, is that morals being choices. When we have more stuff, we have more choices. You brought up prisons, and for a long time, jails only existed to hold people while you were sitting at the gallows. The original division between felony and misdemeanor, where felonies were punishable by death, and misdemeanor, as you can, if you break down the word, was public humiliation.
Right, being
Because of loss of
slapped,
face.
being put in the stocks and having fruit
stocks.
thrown at you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, branding, caning. But the idea of locking people up and just holding them forever requires you having enough food and enough resources to do that. If we had 10% of our people dying off every winter, there's no way that we would have prisons. It just wasn't efficient. And I like this. I like the fact that we can now do things that we think are better because we can afford to do them. And that's been the biggest moral shift that I see. It's not about it's not about we've actually changed that much. It's that we have the resources to follow our best ideals. If 10% of our people are starving every year, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that that's not my family. And so that focuses in on family and tribe, and within that context of limited resources, if you aren't all about your tribe, then your tribe's going to die out. Diversity is, in this context, a luxury good. But diversity is really awesome because now we have people from a bunch of different backgrounds who can look at the same problem. And if you maintain that only my tribe, you can't compete in this world. It's then at this point, then racism becomes a luxury good, or a throwback to a time when it made sense.
Say that again, because that's controversial.
Well, it's controversial. It's at one point, if you were not about my genes, and let's put it to genetic level, because we taught family, tribe, race. If not right. Genetic level, if you didn't think that your genes were more important than other people's genes, the people that did think that would wipe you out and take your stuff.
Yeah.
So at a certain scarcity level, fighting for your own genes is the only thing that makes sense. Once that scarcity level is gone, then people that are still stuck in that mindset are not going to be able to compete. They're cutting themselves off from too many resources, from too many allies, from so to be super racist right now is either to be a throwback or to be working from such a huge level of privilege that you don't need other people to help you.
Right, either one. Oh yeah, that's great.
The two ends. Yeah.
It's the same with the anti-commerce views, or anti-money making views, right? Because it is industrial commerce. That's what 1880 represents, right? That was the rise of industrial commerce. Now we can all eat. Now we don't have to execute people for being thieves, especially if they say they're sorry. And before we would just hunt them down. Oh, they stole something. Chase them down because they're going to come and steal from us again, right?
I had a kid explain to me that that leisure time was a right, that it should be the default setting, that he shouldn't have to work to get vacation time. And it's like, and he's just laying this out as if it's just completely logical, and he's completely unaware of what an immense level of privilege he has to have to believe that if I shouldn't need to take care of my own needs, because that's someone else's job to keep me fed and warm, and I should be able to sit on the beach drinking beer all day because that's my nature.
Mm.
And it's like, go back in time, even 20 years, much less 2 generations, and this kid considers himself poor.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
And it just is a breathtaking example of self-indulgence and privilege. Mm-hmm. And it amazes me that it can happen, and I'm kind of gratified that we've made a world so easy that mindset can even exist.
Yeah, we could be happy about that.
We can, but at the same time, it's like, if that ever becomes the majority view,
we're done.
And they can, was it de Tocqueville?
Yeah.
That said that, democracy can only last till people realize they can vote money out into their own pockets. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can only vote money into your own pockets when the economy isn't growing, I think, is the new theory.
Well, it is. Yeah. And we just harness ourselves or our grandchildren with a level of debt that's insane.
Well, yeah. And we, if we're in touch with our actual capacities, right? All these problems are barely problems, right? We can solve them. Yeah. We have that capacity too. It's if you're thinking your whole thing about affordances, I mean, just how else can we handle this situation?
Yeah.
There's so many ways. We have so many options.
Yeah. And they all have consequences.
They all have consequences. It's always good to remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought that was fun to sort of lay that out a little bit, because I think that people really miss how new the idea of the prison is. Mm-hmm. And how linked the idea of self-defense itself is to this idea that the other person has some value. So you have to limit your response. You mitigate your own violence.
To get super technical, up until 1985, Tennessee versus Garner, it was perfectly legal for a police officer to shoot someone for running away.
Right.
That changed in 1985.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that case, if you read reading cases, Supreme Court cases, is always fun. It sounds like I'm being sarcastic. It's not. It's fun.
Yeah, I agree.
But the reasoning was, this has been true going back to English common law. This has been true forever. But we haven't really revisited this ethic since we quit hanging people for everything. It was based on the idea that, well, you're going to hang them anyway. So what's the difference between, killing them for running away and not? And it's like, in 1985.
Yeah.
That's...
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, they talk about there's this thing, and we were talking about race, like that black kids have to be taught by their parents to
give them the talk. Yeah.
How do you deal with police and stuff? And it's like, well, I was a hippie kid. I got that talk too. Like, if you ever run from the police, because I was 1985. I graduated high school, right? So
yeah,
I got that talk, as an early teen. Like, if you ever run from the police, they're not going to think twice about shooting you. Mm-hmm. That's what I was told. That's what I thought was the norm.
Yeah. And to what extent did that become a self-fulfilling prophecy?
Right. Anyway, that is certainly fascinating material. That another one I like is the death rate, the murder rate in San Francisco in the 1880s was 2,000 people a year. Something like that.
Have you read Mark Twain's, I think it's called Roughing It?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But the first section is on him going to Carson City and San Francisco. And his section on Carson, have you ever seen the TV series Deadwood?
I haven't watched the whole thing. I've seen a little bit.
Okay, Deadwood compared to Mark Twain's description of Carson City at about the same time,
Yeah.
Deadwood was a Disneyland of cartoon characters.
Yeah, right.
It's
There were some bad dudes there.
well, it was one of those. There was a body of night in
Yeah.
a town at least. They did not count them unless they were white, so there's no idea how many bodies there actually were. You normal conversation started if you got your man yet, because you weren't really a citizen until you killed somebody.
Mm.
It was just dark, and that was just normal for them.
So in San Francisco, right, there your basic weapons, right? A coat,
Mm-hmm.
a hat, a Bowie knife, a gun, and a walking cane, because they were just figuring out streetlights.
Yeah.
That all of those things were weapons, right? And so when you went into a restaurant or a theater, there was a coat check girl who was actually the weapon. That was actually weapons check. They would take your weapons while you were in that. There was that institution got developed to try and limit violence in the city. And those, of course, what happened by the 1930s, the coat check girls became the mechanism for bribing the police. It was, and for generally political bribes. Coat check girls hung around for quite a while after carrying guns and carrying big knives, and carrying sticks even went diminished significantly. The coat check girls were still there because it was such an easy way to pass money to someone.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah.
And the armed culture in this. Sorry, I just triggered this on my throat. Like if you read anything written in the 1890s by a British author, a gentleman did not leave his house. I'm not talking, a nobleman. I'm talking anyone considered socially acceptable.
Yeah, not a Jew, basically.
Yeah, basically did not leave his house without a walking stick and a revolver.
Right.
Read Sherlock Holmes. It was set in the 1890s.
Yeah.
Not leave your house without a walking stick and a revolver.
Yeah. So we really, really have it good, don't we?
We do.
We're actually teaching self-defense.
Well, we're in a freaking we're in a freaking pandemic apocalypse right now, and I've got plenty of food and unlimited supply of entertainment, stacks of books. This is the training wheel apocalypse right here.
Right.
Yeah.
It is hard to see the future.
Mm-hmm.
That was there's so many more questions, but we have been talking for quite a bit of time.
We have. This is a long time to sit for me. That's why I'm doing all these weird stretches with my shoulders and stuff. Yeah.
I was actually thinking we could do this standing up.
For a while. And then the knees give out after a while. It's all. I'm broken. If I was a horse, Cammy would put me down a couple years ago.
Oh no. I'm looking through some of my questions to see if there's anything that big.
There's a question I kind of want to bounce for you, because I don't think it's in the book, because I've been playing it, but it's a way to look at the whole deep brain the way that I'm doing it here.
Yeah.
So instead of setting up your deep brain, your subconscious, something separate from you, and using the CONCOM model, the monkey, the lizard, and the human, in one estimation, you are in your deep brain when none of those three dispute each other. When everything is in agreement. And this is what I mostly want to bounce off you about, the silence in the head, whatever. It seems like when there's no friction between the three parts is a part where we're just functioning and not conscious. That the words on the brain, the parts where we're thinking about our thinking, are the places where we have divisions in our brain. Does that make sense to you?
Well, okay. So one of the most famous kinesiology studies is they figured out that all the parts of your brain that you use to shoot a basketball are being used when you imagine shooting a basketball, plus your neocortex.
Mm-hmm.
So like they put people's heads inside of machines and showed this, that you can the when you are uninhibited, or there's nothing mediating your experience, just simply shooting a basketball, the stuff that happens in your brain, the neurons that fire, all those happen when you imagine shooting a basketball.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have the suppression of movement. And that's what humans have. We have this giant movement suppressor called the neocortex. That's what it does. And the 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 brain evolved. Like, this is a joke, but the brain, I shouldn't tell you it's a joke. It's sneakier if you don't tell it. But they say that there's a little creature that swims in the ocean called a sea squirt, and it swims and then it attaches itself to a rock. And the first thing it does is it digests its own brain, because when you're stuck to a rock, you don't need a brain. Brains are for movement. So the first thing it does is digest its brain, just like an academic when they get tenure. And so the brain evolved to see around the next rock, to see see around the corner,
Mm-hmm.
to make our movement choices better, to make movement better, right? Our immediacy, the immediacy of it. But as we got better and better at imagining what's around the corner, we were able to imagine what's the absolute end of the universe. We were able to imagine scenarios that could never really happen.
Mm-hmm.
And in the most elaborate detail, we just get better and better at it. But it's all constructed on a base layer of what makes us move. It's the same. So the imagination is what makes you move. There's no separation between imagining and doing. It's just that you add suppression if you don't move.
That was cool. Had nothing to do with the question I asked.
Okay, goodbye. So, I feel like it's set up. So go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's to put it another way. I assume at some point you've had that moment. You've had that Satori moment, that moment where you're so totally plugged into your senses, and one of the things that's really universal is that it seizes the second you notice it.
Yeah, right, sure.
Okay, so, and to me that's the same thing. When your brains are aligned, when you're actually working from your deep brain,
yeah,
you're in that moment.
Right.
But any conscious awareness is a fracture.
Right.
Between those that pops you out of it.
Right. So in many, not in all cultures, and not universally within all cultures, but in cultures that have possession, deity possession,
mm-hmm.
It's common to have the idea that you don't remember what happened when you were possessed by the deity.
Right? I have that down in my head as an excuse.
I know.
When I do something really, really horrible, it's because I've never had anyone, and we've talked about this before. It's like, of all the criminals that I blacked out and I don't remember,
mm-hmm.
It's like, and I've done this in interrogations, is like, you realize that that's bullshit and that never really happens. People only do that when they're guilty and they don't want to say that they're guilty, and everyone knows it. And sometimes the guy would confess.
Yeah.
But the side, I've never seen anyone black out and give all their money to charity, or black out and do something really nice for somebody else.
Yeah. But
they always, I want to do air quotes so bad. They always black out when they're about to do something they really, really know is a bad thing to do, and they want to have some.
Super important point. And in fact, all of these cultures have not all, certainly Chinese do, but I'm pretty sure that you guys see this in Africa too. The idea of a fake medium, right? A fake possession. Someone is faking it, and because they want money, or they want something else, or they want power or something, right? And so they ritualize the real possession versus the fake one. And it is interesting. You will also get lots of gradients, and this is why I would reject that assumption, because you get gradients to say, well, I was there, I remember this, and they're describing the same thing but in a very altered state. And they're often doing things physically, hitting themselves so that they bleed and stuff, doing things to create an altered state. And I'm not actually that interested in the question of, do they remember or not?
Mhm.
The reason I brought it up was that I think that there's an ideal there about a completely unmediated state. And the moment you're aware of what's happening, in other words, the moment you're tracking it enough to be
Yeah.
laying down memory, you're
You
not.
aren't in it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, and that goes down a whole rabbit hole with dissociation, and which we definitely don't have time for. So,
But that's kind of did I answer that question a little
not
bit?
really. That's okay.
Sorry, give it to me one more time.
Um, no, I think we're good. It's no, it's what you said gives me a lot to think about, so I'm cool with that.
All right.
More important than having my question answered is having more stuff to think about.
Well, since I know you studied psychology, and it's the final question, and we'll just wrap it up. Is the collective unconscious a real thing?
No, it's all models, but the collective unconscious. Have you read Ken Kesey's 100th Monkey?
Yes.
Okay, you realize that was a complete fake. That was a hoax.
Yes.
The experiment with the monkeys never happened.
No, but they did find out when they did a bunch of experiments that young monkeys can learn to clean potatoes and old monkeys can't.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with the collective unconsciousness or the 100 monkey thing. That's
So
completely
that
irrelevant.
idea of the collective unconsciousness, you completely reject, that it just appears in your brain. But what about the evolutionary concept that we all share the same stories because we were all the same people eventually, if you go back far enough?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But the idea that if you raise a child separate from any cultural things, that they're going to pick up something from the rest of our brains, not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I love talking to you. Thank you so much, Rory, for the time and for your wisdom. The book he wrote is Living in the Deep Brain, Connecting to Your Intuition. It's really it's a good read. It's fun.
Cool.
It's fun.
Thanks.
It will get people to think.
You're always fun. I'm very curious about whether any of your audience could, because the way you and I talk is not the way normal people talk. So
thank you.
Very curious about how the audience will react to this.
Great. Well, let's share it with everybody. Thank you and goodbye.
Cool. Bye.
Thanks for listening, everybody. If you enjoyed this interview and you'd like to hear more like this, feel free to support me on Patreon at Scott Park Phillips. Also, check out my books on Amazon.com.